This podcast is being brought to you in part by the veteran-founded Hero Soap Company located in Phoenix, Arizona. In today's environment, we must be aware of the products we apply to our skin. As a two-time cancer survivor, I cannot afford to take chances, and I use these products myself. The soaps will leave you feeling clean and refreshed. All the products made by the Hero Soap Company are made in the United States with the highest quality ingredients sourced from companies in the United States whenever possible. The products are made in small batches to ensure high quality and contain premium essential oils and fragrance. All Hero soaps are created without synthetic colorants, parabens, and sulfates that are irritating to the eyes, skin, mouth, and lungs, and are cruelty-free, meaning these products are not tested on animals. Each 5-ounce bar of soap is handmade in Phoenix, Arizona, and the body wash is available in 8 ounces with such refreshing scents as the woods, tea tree, lavender, the fields, bourbon, lime, the pines, and Arctic. You will absolutely love this soap. Please also check out their gear for sale. All the products are reasonably priced. Being veteran-founded, the company understands the dedication and sacrifice that each family makes to serve their country. A portion of sales is donated back to charities that are focused on helping veterans and our first responders. Over 1,200 bars have been sent to our deployed troops. Please check out their website, herosoapcompany.com, for pricing and a detailed description of all the products. When ordering, use the code RAP for a 10% discount. The company information will be listed in the podcast notes and featured on the podcast website, Facebook group, page, and the podcast Instagram. Welcome, everyone. It's a Wrap with Rap. I am your host, Ron Rappaport. Before we start, I would like to thank all our listeners, sponsors, and supporters that have helped to make this podcast so successful. The podcast is being heard in all 50 states, all provinces of Canada, and over 45 countries around the world. The podcast has been ranked by FeedSpot as one of the top 35 overcoming adversity podcasts from thousands of podcasts on the web in that category, and it's ranked by traffic, social media followers, and content freshness. This podcast features people who have overcome life's challenges and adversities, people who can inspire, motivate, and educate us on an assortment of topics. My guest today is Rob Lohman. Rob has been through the ringer and continues to press on. His life resume includes alcohol and drug addiction, gambling addiction, divorce, bankruptcy, mental health issues, suicide ideation, prison recovery, and transformation. Sober since 2001, Rob currently helps people suffering from substance abuse to find freedom from addiction and incarceration. Rob invests in the lives of those wanting to seek positive change, whether it's coming out of addiction, prison, or just wanting more for their lives. Rob is the founder of the Addiction Recovery Hub and host of the Beyond the Bars radio podcast. He is a dynamic speaker who shares an extremely powerful journey of persistence, faith, and inspiration. Rob is also the author of the Addiction Intervention book, which is #1 in 14 categories for bestseller and new releases on Amazon, as well as 2 other books, The Momentum Journey, Breakdown at Exit 63, and 101 Reasons to Quit Getting Drunk During the Holidays. Rob's journey has brought him to a place where he has such a heart for helping others, and he is currently developing a transformational house for men who are on their own recovery journey. Welcome, Rob, to the podcast.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I'm reading all the stuff you're involved. You are a one busy guy.
Yeah, I like to use the word productive. Busy is one of those words when people say, oh, I'm so busy, I don't want to talk to you. But when they hear productive, they're like, oh, what are you producing? So Yeah, I'm a productive guy, I like to
All
say, but I
right.
am very busy too.
Yeah. Well, productive's good. So
Yeah.
I always like to start at the beginning. What were your early years growing up? And was there an introduction to off-limit substances in that time period?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, good old Midwest town, and aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, we were all really close to each other. So I loved growing up in Indiana. Even in
Right.
the winters, I loved the winters, the summers, and everything. And so I wouldn't say I had, you hear some people say they had a traumatic childhood and that's why they drank or drugged, but I didn't really have that. I just really kind of felt like I was wired differently than a lot of other kids. And yeah, alcohol was this allure that it was fun and it was attractive because, grandparents, friends up at the lake in Michigan just had social gatherings and alcohol just looked like it was fun. And so we moved from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Texas, Fort Worth, Texas when I was 9 years old. And that's when things kind of started to change where I didn't really feel like I fit in. So I was
Yeah.
really always trying to seek ways to fit in with other people. And alcohol ended up being that outlet for me.
So how did the alcohol make you feel? Did it give you like more confidence or how that worked?
Yeah. Well, it just, yeah, it made me feel good. I mean, it was one of those, again, I didn't have many traumatic moments, but it was just trying to fit in. So the adjustment of living in the South as a Midwest boy. But yeah, I just remember getting drunk for the first time, and it was at a Christian youth party in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm sorry, Fort Worth, Texas. And one guy brought in a six pack of beer and just said, "Hey, Lohman, you want to have a beer with me and these two girls?" And I was like, "Sure, heck, why not?" 6 pack, two girls and two guys, and I just slammed 3 beers like that, Ron. And
Wow.
I always say that alcohol had me at, and from there it was really kind of off to the races. And I'm sure your listeners can relate to that and try to figure out how did I get started? How do I get out of this kind of mess? And so, hey, one thing I wanted to throw out there real quick, Ron, to your people is a little free gift for them, and then we'll move on. Is if people go to freerecoverybook.com, they can get some good resources there. I forget that sometimes, and I just want people to know that's available. But yeah, I got drunk that night, and I'll tell you this, Ron, I started wearing contacts, and I don't know if you remember when contacts first came out.
Yeah.
But they were the hard ones, right? Little tiny round hard ones, and they
Right.
literally covered your pupil. And I had those in that night, and my mom looks back at me and she goes, "What's wrong with your eyes?" And I said, "Oh, Mom, my allergies are killing me." And that was it. So I just I found the excuse to be drunk right from the beginning.
You know, I was going to kind of stop you at this stage of the conversation and just to throw this out for the moms and dads out there. I mean, is there any advice you can give them when their kid is that young? And did your parents have any clue? Like you were drinking, or what can
Yeah,
parents do, to maybe just put the brakes on it at an early age?
that's an interesting question. And as an interventionist and coach, people ask me that a lot. They'll say, my son, I don't know if he's using drugs or whatever now. And I can be talking about a son that's 40, right? That's still an
Right.
immature 15-year-old kid at 40. But we're talking more about, around the 15, the early teen years. And some of the signs are they're losing interest in things they used to have excitement for. And that could just be growing out of a phase, but sometimes it's worth looking into. And I see that, I have a 15-year-old son now
Right.
and a 13-year-old daughter. And I'm watching, I'm always watching people. They're good kids, right? But I'm always watching. And so when I hear maybe a friend of theirs that stopped doing something like a sport or something just because they don't know why and just dropped out, sometimes at the base of that's going to be some smoking pot. And that seems to be the socially acceptable thing now, is like pot's medicinal. And my son needs it because he has ADHD and anxiety, and we're an overprescribed, I believe, ADHD and anxiety country.
Yeah.
But yeah, losing interest in things, sleeping in a lot more. Now, again, that could be teenager, right?
Right.
But also it could just paying attention to those and trying to have those authentic conversations with them, not in the moment of possible suspicion of use, but a later time, and just say, hey, bud, let's go for a walk. Let's go grab coffee and hang out, and just say, I've just been noticing some things. So you doing all right? You experience any challenges right now? And if you can have that kind of relationship with them, then they can really open up and hopefully let the cat out of the bag that they're drinking a little bit or vaping, and the stuff in the vape isn't what it should be. So yeah, lack of motivation and just irritability is another one. Again, we chalk that up to being a teenager,
Right.
but irritability and just sharpness and lack of interest are things to be concerned about.
Okay, that's good advice. Now, I might be getting ahead of myself, but when did you realize you had a problem like an addictive behavior? Was it at a young age, or did you realize that down the road?
No, in the beginning. I mean, I started drinking at 14. I started gambling at 15. And I was just kind of this all or nothing kind of guy. And it was just adrenaline and just kind of, woo, yeah, I mean, yes, so I like the rush. And I can look back on that now. And you can look at dopamine depletion and dopamine issues, but the brain doesn't stop developing till we're 26. So
Right.
this frontal cortex that we have as young men and women, especially men, and we start drinking or using at a young age, really that logic kind of goes out the window a little bit. The ability to deal with conflict and struggles and just kind of how you're wired can really play a role in your development. Because they say, and I got sober at 29 years old, Ron, and I started drinking at 14. So what they say, those experts out there say, is that when you start abusing substances, you really kind of stop developing mentally in a sense. I mean, you don't become like dumb, but
Yeah.
it's like you just kind of stop that prefrontal cortex processing. And so when I got sober at 29, I could agree. I was like a 14, 15, 16-year-old boy.
Wow. Yeah. Now, take us through your high school, college, and early adult years. What was life like? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh man, I want to be like my doctor. I mean, like my doctor. My grandfather, Papa, he was a doctor in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Great man. He delivered like half the babies in Fort Wayne, and just a real respectful guy. And he had a great demeanor about him. He loved his grandkids, and I'm like, I want to be just like Papa. And that was my goal from a kid till through college. It was, I'm going to go to medical school and be like Papa. The problem was, Ron, there was this shadow of alcoholism and addiction and adrenaline that followed me along. So whenever I put potential and alcohol in the same room together, alcohol won pretty much every single time.
Hands down.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was, I remember, so high school was really easy for me. I mean, I had, straight A's and, senior class president, and just joined all these things, was a good swimmer. And senior year, I quit swimming because, swimming was getting in the way of my alcohol.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could have gone far, but who knows? I feel like then I'm playing God saying, oh, I could have gone really far if I would. Well, I don't know. But so I quit swimming senior year of high school, and then went to college, and it was like game on. I mean, I was free. My parents weren't there. They were paying for college,
Yeah.
but they weren't there with me. And for a guy that was dealing with insecurity, but yet you couldn't tell that on the outside, I can look back and see I probably suffered from some depression, but you couldn't tell it on the outside.
Right.
And college was it was just wild. I mean, I couldn't remember sometimes if something happened freshman year or junior year. And I just was a wild party guy, but I held it together, somehow graduated in 4 years, and I remember on graduation day, Ron, I was sitting there, and, when you go to college, you have your GPA and your major, and then the rest of your GPA. And if you don't hit the GPA in your major, you can't graduate with that degree.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, and I've got both sets of grandparents. This was back in Indiana, so aunts, uncles, cousins, they all came down, and nobody except for me had a clue that I may not graduate.
Wow.
And
Talk
I
about
am just
pressure.
oh man, I'm freaking out that morning. I totaled my car before my senior year in a drunk driving accident, and just put on a lot of weight my senior year. And the first thing my mom said to me, or maybe the second thing, was, wow, you've gotten big. And I was just a big, heavy guy, and just beer and food. And I'm sitting there on that morning of graduation. I still don't know if I'm going to graduate. And my professor calls me in and says, Lohman, get your butt in my office. I'm like, all right. So my heart's pounding. I'm going to his office, and he sits me down. He's like, what have you been doing all year? I said, what do you mean? And he pulls out it was a 5-page final and each page had a grade on it. And he goes 99, 100, 97. Like, he goes, I've never seen a grade this high in all my tenure here at DePaul University. What the hell have you been doing?
Wow.
And I just looked at him, I said, and I go, did I graduate? He goes, yep. And I just ran out of the office and went to graduation. Never told my parents that story until years and years later. But college was a big blur, and there's definitely I've worked through the regrets in my life, and that's probably one of them that I just I didn't get it because I was too into my addictions.
Did during your college years, was there any did the alcohol play any behavioral issues for you?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Can you
I mean,
talk about that or any?
Yeah, I was just a liar, a manipulator. I could talk myself out of situations I got into very easily. I would work on, like, I remember I got in trouble my freshman year and almost got kicked out of school. And that was like towards the beginning.
Let me take a very brief moment out to alert all our patients and caregivers out there that Rare Patient Voice, a supporter of the podcast, is paying for your input. Patients 16 years and older and caregivers, family and friends of any disability, disorder, syndrome, illness, or condition have the opportunity to express their opinions through surveys and interviews to improve medical products and services. Who knows your journey better than you? Rare Patient Voice puts you in touch with researchers who are developing products and services that can help you and others with your condition. These researchers need input of patients to develop products and services that have significant impact on patients' lives. Over the past 9 years, Rare Patient Voice has paid patients over $10 million. When you join Rare Patient Voice, you may be invited to participate in interviews, surveys, or online communities where you will share your insights. Rare Patient Voice usually has hundreds of studies running at any time, so there are many opportunities to participate. You will earn $120 per hour for participating in these studies. By making your voice heard, you are a catalyst for change. Rest assured your input will be used to help other patients like you. There is no cost at all to you, the participant. You can get more information and sign up by clicking the link in the sponsor's notes.
Beginning of school.
Yeah.
And I just remember I didn't know how to tell my parents. And I sent my mom a cassette tape. Back then, those cassette tape things they had.
Sure.
Sent her a cassette tape and just was, oh, school's going great and all this stuff. I said, oh, by the way, and I just kind of confessed at the end of the tape. What a horrible way to tell your parents you got in trouble. But yeah, for me, it was just, what I needed to do to just skate by. What was the quick fix? Because again, I was a gambler too, and what could I do to just kind of manipulate situations? And I wasn't like a total jerk by any means, but you just couldn't tell the stuff was going on behind the scenes. Externally,
yeah,
you had other fraternity brothers and people that were a lot worse than you that drew the attention away from you. But yeah, my behavior was just erratic, drunk driving all the time, a couple overnights in jail in college. And I mean, inside I felt it was almost like I had convinced myself that God was keeping me alive for a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And I was kind of sort of indestructible in a way. And there was one night, a friend of mine and I we borrowed some bicycles without permission from a fraternity house.
Yeah.
Which is called theft. I understand now.
I was going to say that, but
yeah. And a couple cars as well. But you just live for the moment. And I remember one night we rode our bikes out to the rock quarry in Greencastle, Indiana. And it was like a 200-foot drop if you went off the edge, right?
Wow.
And I'm riding my bike and tripping on acid and drunk. And my buddy Vince at the last second tackles me off of my bike. The bike goes off the edge.
Wow.
And just went down. And it was one of those moments like, holy cow. And we just went back to the party and just kept going. Like, it didn't even faze me.
Wow.
And what an awful way to live, and that didn't stop after college either. I mean, that mentality continued for a long time until I got sober, and still even had to try to break that mentality in recovery, because it's not like you get sober and, hey, you're 100% solid, just like God created you.
It's not like turning on a light switch. I don't know.
No. I mean, it'd be nice if it were, but
yeah,
the part of the journey's in the struggle.
What's going on after college? Well, take us through that. And I think you went to Vail, didn't you?
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah. So after college, I always had this dream of living in Colorado. Again, the allure of Colorado. You see the movie, Dumb and Dumber, and all those cool ski
Yeah.
movies and stuff, and you're like, oh, that looks like a great place. So we bought a week-long trip to Vail in our senior year fraternity auction, and came out to Vail, and I'm just thinking, man, this is where I'm going to go. My parents are thinking, we just spent like 125 grand on college, and you're going to go to Vail to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
So they gave me permission to go as long as I had a time limit, like 18 months, and I was out.
Okay.
Right? I had to go back and get a big boy job. And I just went to Vail, and I was 215 pounds, became a bouncer at a bar, and it's the same story, Ron. I mean, it just went on. The party continued. And, Vail was just one of those things of multiple jobs, quitting, just drunkenness and having fun. Quote unquote, with air quotes here, fun if you're not watching the video.
Wasn't there something with a car?
There were a couple things with cars. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but there was a when the car got stolen. Is that the one we're talking about?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Okay, actually, that was actually in that that was in sobriety. Never mind. But I mean, I totaled my car my senior year, and it ended up flipping end over end 6 times. And I didn't even have a scratch.
Wow.
And there's a picture of that in the first book you talked about, the Momentum Journey. But those were the moments, right? I mean, I should have died multiple times, but Vail was just one of those things. And I got the call from my parents and was like, hey, it's been 18 months, time to come home. And I was like, yep, time to come home. So I met the girl of my dreams out there, but I was very shallow in my relationships because as an alcoholic or an addict and people that live for the moment, the ability to go deep in intimacy almost vanishes.
Yeah.
And so I remember my girlfriend at the time saying, I just feel like we're just roommates and just friends. Like there's no depth. Because I didn't know how to go there.
Right.
I was afraid of conflict and had to work through that in recovery. Just because I was in a sense like a shallow man because of my addictions, I could just let relationships go. And they're, oh, okay, well, that one's gone. And here I am, like a guy that grew up in the church, right? And this Christian guy. And I was like, never didn't live that for many, 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 many years. But I always believed I was saved, if you will. I just never chose to live the Christian life as laid out for me. But I always knew it was there and available. I just didn't want to go that route. And so I moved from Vail to Texas. Again, my parents still living in Fort Worth, Texas. I moved to Dallas, became what was I doing? I was working for a bank at the time, like a personal banker, and started this journey in commercial real estate, went back to get my MBA. I started wanting more for my life. The girl I was talking about decided that she wanted to go a different direction. And I was like, oh man, let that one go. She was a good one.
Wow.
And you look back on some stuff, you're like, what if, but then again, that's playing God, right? You're kind of like, well,
yeah,
you don't know what if, but that's where you were at the time. And I ended up getting, meeting a good alcoholic girl in my dreams. We get married in my addiction, different type of drinkers. I could function, and I do not like the word functioning alcoholic. I'm just going to say that right now.
Okay.
Because the reality is you're not functioning. I mean, you might be functioning and not getting DUIs and losing jobs or relationships, but you're not functioning because you're under the influence of substances all the time, right?
Yeah.
So even though there's success and there's money in those things, it's kind of this, when I do interventions with families, I'm like, well, but he's a functioning alcoholic and he's really successful. I'm like, yeah, but every time he drinks, he gets a DUI twice a year, or every time they do this happens, or when they run out of alcohol, they're a jerk. It's kind of like, are we really functioning? No, we're living this kind of like looking at a heartbeat monitor. It's kind of just this steady, you're kind of dead, but living,
So it's kind of like it's like an existence.
Yes. An existence.
Yeah.
With substances. Because when the substances go away, you're a different person. And with the substances in, you're a different person. And so for me, again, I had my job. Again, I was gambling a lot too, married, just a bad dysfunctional marriage, really, and ended up graduating with my MBA in 2001, moved back to Indiana to work for my uncle in commercial real estate. And one of my thoughts was, again, dysfunctional relationships, right? If we move to Indiana, our life will change. Like if we relocate, then our life will get better.
Yeah.
And guess what happened, Ron?
It didn't get
The two problems came with ourselves, and that was us. And so I ended up getting divorced. I really started wanting more for my life. I mean, there was something churning inside me, like this existence sucks. You know, I've almost died in car wrecks. I've spent night and overnight jails. I've had success in business here and there, but I'm just a smoldering discontent of a man. And so I decided that I won't get into all the story there, but I decided that just being married wasn't the best option for both of us.
right.
And so we ended up getting divorced. I kind of went on a free-spirited couple months, and then I decided I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to go to AA, and that was my out, right? I heard about AA. I've had family members, older than me in a recovery. I was like, I'm going to go to this group of people and check it out. And I went to this meeting, and I'm not, some people say, well, if you're in recovery and you're in AA, press radio and films, you never mention what program you're in. Well, this is my experience, and it's not everybody's experience. But for me, I was like, AA is not for me. People, they're smoking, they're talking about how life sucks being sober and all these things, right? And I was like, I'm done with this. I'll just do it on my own. Well, the bottom line is, Ron, after I got sober later, that meeting I went to that I thought was a smoking meeting, they've never smoked there. It was a speaker meeting. It was the best meeting in Fort Wayne. I just heard what I wanted to hear, so I didn't have to go back. And I didn't go back. And I went on my own little bender for a while. But God was getting a hold of me. He was shaking some trees. And I started dealing with a lot of suicide ideation, where I would be driving down the highway and I'd see my car veer off the highway and explode, and I'd be dead on the side of the road. And I'm like, man, what is going on with me?
Yeah.
I'd be crying at night sometimes, but I was so lonely and desperate, but I had so many quote unquote friends, right, that I could do stuff with. So externally, again, things looked okay. Internally, I was emotionally, spiritually, and financially bankrupt. Like I was just dying inside. And one night I was hanging out in a bar in Fort Wayne. I'm back in Fort Wayne again. I keep going back to Fort Wayne. Just say this, I'll never go back to Fort Wayne, Indiana to live again. I mean, unless God calls me there and I have to go. But I love it in the summer.
You kept circling back. You kept going back there.
I did. I mean, that's home. I mean, I loved Fort Wayne, and that's where I started my recovery. But this night I was hanging out in the bar, and I drank and drove 8 nights a week, Ron. I was your designated drunk driver. Never got a DUI. Talked myself out of 3 of them, right?
Wow.
But never got one. And hanging out in a bar this night, and all of a sudden, it was loud music. It was tons of quote unquote fun, lots of girls, just everything, right? And then all of a sudden, the bar got completely dead silent. Like you could hear a pin drop, and I audibly hear the words, "You're done." And then the bar got really loud again. And I looked at my buddy Sean O'Brien. And I was like, dude, I got to go home. I think I'm finally done drinking. Like I really felt like God was answering my prayer to quit drinking.
Right.
And I drive home kind of like 2 different guys, like the guy that feels like he's sober and just transitioned to a sober life, and then the guy that's really drunk driving the car. And I get home, and the next thing I know, I'd put 350 pounds on my barbell on my workout bench in my living room, picked up that barbell, unhinged my elbows, and just dropped the weight across my chest.
So you were trying to end it.
Yeah. Unplanned. And that was just like an autopilot moment. But what happened in that moment was, as my elbows were unhinged, the way I kind of describe is I feel like God kind of stopped time in my apartment and looked at my dog Jake and said, go save your dad's life. And he kind of revealed himself to me through my dog. And my dog was just looking at me and nudging my head, my knee with his head, and just looking at me like, what are you doing? And my first thought was, who's going to feed you tomorrow?
Right.
And I'm like, what about my mom and my dad and my brother? And just started thinking about the good stuff. And so God, with all, his might and strength and purpose in life, put that barbell back on the rack. And my God, really carries the weight of the world. And he did that night and put that weight back on the barbell.
Let's take a moment to talk about those people ready to lose all the weight you want. Did you know that less than 2% of dieters manage to keep off the weight? When you are told to skip entire food groups, forced to limit the amount of calories you eat, your only option is to use discipline to stick to the plan. Behavioral science has proven that we only have a small supply of discipline, and the reason you need discipline to follow a diet is because diets are not natural. Your ancestors survived by eating their fill when food was plenty so they could cruise through times when it was harder to get. Your genetic code is hardwired to go without food for short periods between times of plenty, and that is what is missing in the modern diet. These days, it's like you eat one long meal per day, starting at breakfast and ending at bedtime. That is why many are sick, fat, and losing weight seems so complicated that they end up gaining it all back. You need a shift from food obsession to food freedom and give your body the break it deserves. Eat, Stop, Eat is an intermittent fasting method developed by Brad Pilon, which is a unique approach to intermittent fasting that's characterized by the inclusion of up to 2 non-consecutive spaced apart fasting days per week. By the time you finish your first Eat, Stop, Eat protocol, you are going to feel a difference in the way your clothes fit. You will see that your face looks leaner and even notice that you feel lighter and more energetic. During the protocol, your insulin levels will drop to 1/3 of regular levels, allowing you to burn fat at an extreme pace. Practicing 1 to 2 protocols per week will increase insulin sensitivity, allowing you to store more calories in lean tissue and less in fat, even when your insulin levels are higher. If you think you look older than you should, then you probably suffer from chronic inflammation, and we know it is triggered from being overweight and overeating. Chronic inflammation is also linked to most of the diseases associated with aging, including arthritis, hypertension, atherosclerosis, fatty liver, asthma, heart disease, diabetes, and many more. Here is the good news. The Eat, Stop, Eat protocol has been shown to cut markers of chronic inflammation in half. The Eat, Stop, Eat protocol works for anyone, man or woman, no matter how young or old you are. Because you need time to experiment with Eat, Stop, Eat yourself, Brad has agreed to give you a guarantee. You can try it and continue using it for the next 60 days before you even decide if it is for you. Brad expects that before the end of those 60 days, you must agree that Eat, Stop, Eat is a sustainable lifestyle and that it will give you a lifetime of peace and freedom from your struggles with weight and diets. If not, Brad expects you to ask for a refund of your purchase. Brad's passion is to make health and weight control simple again. He wants you to enjoy your life, your food, your family, and your friends to the fullest. The last thing he wants is to bring more stress into your life. So if you decide that Eat, Stop, Eat is not for you, Brad will happily issue a no hassles, no questions asked 100% refund. The Eat, Stop, Eat program is affordably priced at $10 for the digital version and $19 for the physical copy, including shipping. And for a limited time, you will get a quick start guide and 15 days free VIP email coaching. Please click the link in the podcast notes under sponsors links for detailed information and to order.
I slept in peace that night. And I'm a guy that could drink up to 2 bottles of scotch in a day, just all day throughout the day in sales and marketing, right? And he took that guy to that next morning, woke up, my aunt took me to an AA meeting, and God just removed the obsession and compulsion. Like I've never had a craving since June 8th, 2001. Through all of the chaos in recovery, I've never had one craving. And that is all 100% God. From the substance abuse addiction, he took that away from me on that day.
So let me ask you a question. When you stopped the drinking, did you have like the normal side effects? Did you need detoxification or anything? Or?
No, it was literally gone. Like I'd never, and again, with interventions and the stuff I do now and seeing people go in and out of detox and all that, like I never went through detox or anything. It was like I had never, ever touched a drop of alcohol in my entire life. And I haven't cared to even touch it since then.
When you had that barbell incident, did you call anybody?
Not that evening. I mean, that was at 1:30 in the morning-ish or early in the morning, right? But that next morning, yeah, I forgot that part. Thanks for asking that. is I meant to call my Aunt Carol, who had been sober for about 25 years and lived in Fort Wayne. But I accidentally dialed my parents' phone number in Texas and just said, basically, Mom, Dad, I can't quit drinking and gambling, and I need help. And my mom says this, and my dad was on the phone too, but she brings up the fact that we just cried for like an hour. Like I cried. It was the first time I truly, authentically, from the bottom of my heart, cried out for help. And then that's when I talked to my Aunt Carol. She came and picked me up and took me to an AA meeting in the back of a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And man, I walked in there and people were doing just like that. They had a great smile like you do. They were laughing, and they were happy being sober and happy not being under the influence of alcohol. Now, they said recovery is not easy, but these are the steps we do. And I saw God on there, and I was like totally cool with that. And God for me is Jesus Christ. And I saw that. I was like, okay, I can look at this recovery through that lens. And I just did everything they told me to do. My sponsor said, hey, what makes you happy? And I said, milkshakes, without a doubt. And he goes, all right, 12 o'clock every day, I want you to go get a milkshake. So I left work at 12 o'clock on my lunch break, walked down the street and got a milkshake, and just started going to meetings and meeting all these people from all different walks of life that just didn't want to die from addiction, right?
Right.
And back 21 years ago, that's kind of all there was. It was like AA, that was kind of it. Right now we have things like just Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, AA, NA, CA, OA, AA, I mean, all these different recovery type groups. And they all have their purpose in recovery, and I say a timing in your recovery. And, there's some struggles I have with some of that now, this far down the road. But that time, that's what I needed. I needed community. I needed people to tell me what to do. I didn't need to give me suggestions. It was like, do this. I was like, okay, I'll go do that. And, then I had to start working myself out of my hole. I ended up filing bankruptcy because I just couldn't. I had like $67,000 in credit card debt, and recently was divorced and all those things. But I was like, for me, it was either, I remember sitting with my sponsor and I struggle with, I was like, I just want to pay this off. He's like, okay, do you want to die or do you want to live? It's like, it's okay to file bankruptcy, man. It's not, you don't want that easy out, but if this is threatening your sobriety and you're going to gamble a lot or drink over this. So I just kind of sought some wise counsel, and I didn't make a lot of major moves until I talked to people that cared about me enough to say, why are you moving? Like relocating cities, and just realized I needed mentors in my life, and I needed a coach, and I needed a sponsor is what they called it then. But
sure.
That's why now in my life today, I have business coaches that coach me on business, and, people that support me and stuff like that are helping me be accountable to what I say I'm going to do. And I don't do the best job of that these days, even still, right? 21 years later, but I'm a work in progress.
So take us through, okay, so June 8th, 2001, that's when you stopped drinking. Take us through the years 2001 to 2012. What's going on after that?
Yeah, 2001 to 2012, 11 years. Well, I did the things that were healthy in the beginning they told me to do, and it was being community. So I was doing softball. I was doing, camping trips with people. I was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana, right? And I wanted to live somewhere else, because in recovery, they tell you can do anything you want to do as long as your spiritual conditioning is solid. So there's this website. It doesn't exist anymore, Ron, but it was called findyourspot.com.
Okay.
I don't think it does. I'll have to go back and look, but findyourspot.com. So you go in, you put all these parameters in, like, what do you like? I'm like, smaller towns. I like the mountains, pet-friendly cities, whatever. Put all these parameters in, it starts throwing things up like Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky. And I'm thinking, I've never been to any of those states before. It's like, okay. So I fly out to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in commercial real estate when I got sober. I lost my job just because of collateral damage from, just manipulating still in early, in my addiction and early recovery.
Yeah.
And I fly out to Charlotte, North Carolina to go interview with CB Richard Ellis out there to this job. I'm like, this would be great. And I was like, the job didn't work. The interview didn't work out very well. But anywhere I went to an AA meeting somewhere. Just the AA is one of those communities that's around the entire world. Like here in Denver, we have something before the pandemic, we had like 1,600 face-to-face AA recovery meetings a week. And
Wow.
that didn't include all the other type of recoveries. Like you talk about recovery inclusive and stuff, but that was it. So I go to Charlotte and I'm like, I just want to go to a meeting. So I go to this big speaker meeting out in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was actually in Matthews, North Carolina. And it was at a church. There were like 300 people there or something, it was crazy how big it was. And they say, hey, is anybody visiting? And my sponsor said, hey, if you go anywhere, just say you're visiting, right?
Right.
I stood up and I was like, hey, my name's Rob, and visiting, thinking about moving out here. And I literally left that meeting with a stack of business cards. Said, hey, dude, if you want to live here, we got you. So a few weeks later, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow. Instant networking. Instant
Did recovery, got a job just helping a guy lay carpet and somebody in recovery, and then got out of commercial real estate, became an 8th grade algebra teacher. That led to me getting a job as a college career counselor in Indiana University in Greencastle, Indiana. That led to, there's recovery everywhere. That led to me buying a mobile RV, Class A RV, and started the Momentum Journey, which was a documentary and book about why people love what they do. So I started interviewing people around the country, right, about their stories and why they love. I've always been fascinated with people's stories.
Right.
As a podcaster, you are too, as I
Oh,
am as a
absolutely.
podcaster.
Absolutely.
And as the addiction intervention book I wrote, it's my story and 10 other people's stories in there. And I just love stories. And so I said, hey, I'm gonna travel the country in this RV and go interview all these people.
Okay. Is that where you came up with the title, The Momentum Journey, right down
Yes.
at exit 63?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go on YouTube and you type in The Momentum Journey, you'll find a 19-minute documentary I did about these people I interviewed. And I love the word mojo. That's how Momentum Journey started, was the word mojo.
Oh, okay.
And so I left my secured job because I always call myself a passionate broke entrepreneur. I always have ideas and most of them didn't work out.
Yeah.
Well, this one, I had this RV and had 2 recent college grads that came with me. And, on day 1, the RV died 7 times. It's in the documentary. It's in the book. The book is only available from my closet. It's not available on Amazon really anymore or anything like that. It's a really cool book and a cool story. And see, everything leads into something else, right?
Yeah.
I just believe that. I mean, college career counselor, got fascinated with people's careers, left to do that. The night the RV broke down, if you've ever traveled on I-70 before near Effingham, Illinois, there's a huge cross on the side of the road. It's like a 250-foot tall cross. Like you can't miss it. Billions of people see it every year. And the night the RV broke down, I saw that cross and it was like slow motion. And we're going 60, 70 miles an hour, but it was like slow motion to me. I'm like, man, that meant something, but I don't know what it meant.
Right? It was a sign.
It was totally. Yeah. And the RV breaks down that night. A cool story about that. I won't get into it, but that led me to come to Colorado because I incorporated my business in Colorado when I lived in Indiana because I always wanted to live out in Colorado.
Okay.
So I move out here, move into my brother's basement. Again, there's recovery everywhere. So I tap into AA there, move into my brother's basement, keep working on the documentary and the book. And then in 2004, I published my first book. And then that led to me doing this huge 3-day Christian music festival in Colorado, right? Which led me to meet my wife in 2006, who lived in Denver. We get married in 2006. I moved to Denver. Again, still sober, still gambling, though. That's important based on your 2012 mark, okay? Still gambling here.
What are you gambling? What kind of gambling are you doing?
At this point, it was literally like scratch tickets and stuff. So it's nothing like crazy, but still this mentality of trying to get a buck, right?
Yeah.
And so that's still going on behind the scenes. And then my son's born in 2007. Beautiful blessing. Zeke is awesome. He's 15 now and loved being a dad. And then 2008, I end up, so 2007, 6, I'm still doing this 3-day Christian music festival in the mountains of Colorado, right?
Right.
So I live in Denver. In 2008, the event happens, and it was 15,000 people came over 3 days. It was free event, huge blessing, cool story in that too. But that was really hard on our marriage. See, because there wasn't a whole lot of income doing a free 3-day Christian music festival.
Right.
Right. But I had this passion for Jesus, and but lack of focus as a man and a husband and a provider, right? But I did end up getting a great job as a software sales guy. They closed that division down, and a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, you should think about becoming an insurance agent." And all I saw was dollar signs. I'm like, man, I could be that $500,000 a year producer. So I got caught up in that. Did really well in the beginning. But that was 2008 and 9. So 2009. My daughter was born in 2010. And I stopped going to meetings, Ron. I stopped going to Bible studies. I stopped doing the stuff that was good for me. And I was kind of right back where I was back in 2001 without the drinking.
So you're
But
concentrating on on making money,
yeah,
and everything else went to the side.
Yeah, and cutting corners and just kind of, manipulative behaviors came back because I wasn't around good stuff. I wasn't opening up to other men about what was going on in my life.
Yeah,
it just wasn't, and that was the struggle. I was kind of like my own little island internally, but externally you couldn't really tell. But this point in my life, I started pulling away from people. My wife and I weren't doing so hot. And so whenever we would argue and stuff, I'd just say, screw it, I'm going to the casinos. So then I'm at casinos, right? Now I would go to, in my early addiction, I would go to Vegas every now and then. And I love the excitement of the casino. I didn't know why until I got, freed from that, right? But I love the excitement of it. And that was just a tough place to be because I was losing my agency because of just sales and production numbers. My wife and I were both our adrenals were shot. We had 2 young kids. She was working full-time for a radio station with events and weekends, and I was working full-time in my agency, and we just weren't doing well. We weren't connecting, and it was just a tough place to be.
Yeah.
So I ended up losing my agency in November 2011, and for me, that's when a lot of the mental negative messages, like you suck, you failed as a husband, you failed as a father, you're kind of a loser. Like I was hearing a lot of those opposite messages of what God says I am. And I started believing a lot of them that I just did completely drop the ball and failed in many areas of my life, all areas of my life.
Yeah. The mind can really do that. It's all up in the mind.
Yeah. And I was, I call it driven by the subconscious. You believe when you have trauma and all these crazy life events, right? They say you kind of get stuck in the basement of your brain.
Yeah.
And you don't get to the front of your brain where you can reason and think logically, and you're just kind of in the survival mode. And that's exactly where I was personally, in the survival mode. And it was not a fun place to be.
Well, I know 2012 rolls around and something major happens. You want to tell us what's going on that time period?
Big time, yeah. Yeah, 2012 came, and again, I lost my agency in 2011, so I hadn't really been working. I always had a side gig going, so I was trying to build that up, and hope this network marketing thing would take off, right? and I believe in that industry a lot. I just didn't have the right focus and discipline. And so 2012 rolls around, and it was actually February 14th, 2012, and I'd say I refer to a man's brain, or at least my brain. We'll just call it my brain. It was like a waffle. And I could compartmentalize everything going on in my life between work or, being a husband or a father, whatever. I would compartmentalize these things, right? And the best way I can describe what happened that night is like my waffle brain turned into a pancake. And everything just kind of melted together. And I ended up in a mental blackout that morning, lighting some boxes on fire on my covered patio. And once I realized what I had done, I couldn't stop it. It was just, the fire just took off. So I had to rush upstairs and get my family up. It was 1:30 in the morning, rip my wife out of bed, rip our 2 kids out of bed, get downstairs, get my neighbors out. And long story short, the whole house, or the townhouse, pretty much went up that night. Pretty much lost everything that we had. And it was just a climactic moment in my own life. Like, how in the beep did I get here?
Would you say would you say with your journey as involved and complex as it is, would you say that was the rock bottom moment?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. It was one of those moments where I didn't need a wake up call. That was the wake up call. But I also didn't know how to deal with it because Like I knew I was going to go to prison, but what do I do with my family? How do I protect them? And so I went into I was still gambling a lot too. See, that's the thing. My gambler mind kicked in. I was like, I got to cover this up. So I lied about it to everybody, right? And even the next day, when the fire investigator came, our neighbors were talking about some kids that had been like screwing around on their porches, and someone tried to kick someone's front door in a couple days before that or whatever. And so there were all these signs like, oh yeah, okay, I could probably get away with this. And part of it, I probably could have. But from my spiritual perspective and my faith, which kicked in real quick, because I mean, I ran back to AA and church, and like, I was like, I need to figure this out.
Oh yeah.
I just knew I couldn't hold the secret in, but I tried to as long as I could. And again, lying to my wife and friends and kind of playing up what happened, like, oh, poor us. But I was the only guy that really knew it. I mean, to an extent, really knew what happened.
Yeah.
And it was dark. I mean, it was tough. And so eventually I ended up confessing to my wife what happened. And then my attorney was just like, you can't tell anybody this because you're under investigation. I was like, yeah, I know. But so we slowly started bringing in friends and family, telling them exactly what happened. And I get it. People were pissed and felt deceived and they were hurt. And yeah, rightly so. And some stuck with us and some just kind of said, nah, we need to see how this shakes out, family and friends. And, but I knew in June when I confessed to authorities what happened, that's when I really turned everything over to God. Like I could do nothing else. And I just said, it's all his show. And I just held my hands up and said, okay, I surrender.
Yeah.
And then I had to start being pulled out of that mental space going forward. And then long story short, December that year, see, the authorities knew what happened in June of that year, but they didn't arrest me until December of that year.
So did they know before you ever confessed to it?
They had their suspicions.
They had their suspicions.
There really is no way they could have proved it, in my opinion.
Okay.
But I knew it, and there's no way I could have lived with that my whole life. So in December that year, again, 6 months later, they finally arrested me. And on 19 felonies and 13 misdemeanors in December of 2012. And talk about a dark moment, man. I mean, that was like, I was the only guy I'd ever known that had been like arrested like that or was going to go to prison potentially. And so it was like, what do we do now? And then I end up getting arrested and there's so many God stories from this point forward in my life that, my wife and I at some point just need to write a book about it.
Yeah.
But, 2 days later, I was released from jail and on a $100,000 bond, which was reduced to $25,000. And 8 months later, in July 8th, 2013, I was looking at 2 years of work release to 56 years in prison was my open sentencing that day. And you talk about turning over to God and letting him control the outcome. We had no clue. And the courtroom was filled with friends and family and pastors. And the judge, which I know was God just blessing me with going to prison instead of work release, sent me to, total of 13 years in prison was my sentencing back in 2013. Obviously, we're not to 2026 yet, so that's not the story.
Yeah.
But we thought I was gone for 13 years, or it was 8-year charge with the 5-year charge, right? And it was kind of like we didn't know how this was going to shake out. But over time, we learned how to navigate the system. And while I was away over in Delta, Colorado, the furthest prison in Delta from my house, my wife was back here, how to be a single mom. Still figuring out, like, what do I do with this guy? And she had her own conversations with God, and she had to process that herself. Is my husband a psychopath, or who is the guy? And her conviction was to stay with me and work it out. And we have, and we do, and we still do today. There's still collateral damage from that today. And, but while I was gone, I did everything I could to be a dad to my kids, like doing their homework with them on the phone. And like their school sent me their homework ahead of time so I could do it with them. And I had to make the best out of the worst moment of my life. And so I was all about Jesus at the time and poured into my faith, figured out, is the Bible real? I've grown up with this my whole life. I've never read it. So just studying and reading and becoming a student again. And all I could do is work on me. I couldn't work on other people or other stuff. It was just, I'd work on Rob.
Oh, absolutely.
So I figured out who I was again and just stepped into that. And it's easy to do when you're away. more challenging when you get released and come home.
Yeah.
And so 10.5 months later, I was released to a halfway house, spent 11 months in a halfway house. And as I was getting ready to get released, I had to start figuring out what I was going to do for a job or career. I mean, I have an MBA, like I'm not a dumb person. I just make dumb mistakes, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so I get released and then spend 11 months on probation and then, get paroled home. And so 22 months later, I ended up moving back in with my family and just been rebuilding ever since 2000. It was really April 14th or April 15th, 2015. It's like tax day means a lot more to me now than just tax day. It's the day I got to move home in 2015.
So when you were going through all of this, did you ever go back to drinking?
No, I've never thought about it ever. Again, I still gambled, right? That's like, there's these different things. There's process addiction, which is like gambling, food, porn, sex, shopping, gaming. Those are process addictions. Then there's substance abuse. Substance addictions like, drugs, alcohol, things we have to put into our body to actually get high, right? I can't get drunk if I don't drink, right? But I can sure get a dopamine hit, just by anything, looking at a girl, placing a bet, spending more money than I should, buying the big TV, whatever. So that was something I had to learn how to process, but I didn't know what that was until I got trained to be an interventionist and a coach in 2015, launched my business in 2016, and then got into the mental health addiction world. And I've learned a lot since then for sure. Yeah, I learned a lot. Sorry, I was coughing there. So I I muted it real quick. But it was, I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot and I've fallen short and I've risen up and sometimes trying to figure out what God's doing in my life still today. Right. And then stepping into what I feel like he's called me to do, which is helping families. Like I love helping families break the cycle of addiction. That's why I've written 2 books on that and just do podcasting and really try to do
you
that.
Found your purpose.
Yeah. I mean, recovery hasn't been easy. And a lot of times purpose, passion, and pocketbook don't always add up, right, for people. And it's this journey of, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? I've gone through that the last, 7 years of, these seasons of dryness and then seasons of success. And it's just kind of, not everybody can afford intervention, but everyone needs help, right? So I just committed to help anyone that calls or reaches out, whether they can afford it or not, to an extent. But mostly I wrote the book on the addiction intervention book. So I love the intervention process and helping families understand that. And how can the family find freedom, even if their loved one doesn't choose freedom from the addictions? How do they find freedom with healthy boundaries and live their life and don't just drop everything the minute Billy gets drunk and calls for help? It's like, well, Billy, we've given you the resources. We've given you the tools, man. Now it's time for you to use them because we're not running to your rescue again. And that is hard for people, right? Because if I don't do this, then he'll do that. I'm like, you don't have as much control as you really think you do. But we think we have control. That if I do this, they won't do that. It's like, well, control is an illusion. Trust me, I know that.
So what besides raising awareness to drug, alcohol, gambling abuse can we do to fix these problems? The United States is 5% of the world's population, but we consume 70% of the world's prescription meds. We represent 90% of advertising on television in the world for prescription drugs. We lose 800 per day from suicide, alcohol, and drugs. Overdoses have skyrocketed to above 100,000 a year. How do we fix the problem? Let's talk about your program, your book, your website, your coaching techniques.
Wow. I mean, you look at our culture, we have the easiest access to mental health counselors around the world. We got telehealth everywhere, right? We have the easiest access, the most counselors, the most therapists, the most recovery programs, the most treatment centers, all this stuff, right? But yet we still have this horrible epidemic everywhere that we go.
Right.
So what is the answer, right? And I feel like a lot of times we're looking at these things in the wrong places. And I want to go back to what I said earlier in the show about kind of like AA. Like I love AA and NA, like those programs work. The problem with a lot of it is there's in our treatment centers and other stuff, there's a lot of shaming that goes on in fear-based recovery, in the sense that if you don't do this, you will do that. If you don't go to a meeting, you will drink. You hear people say all the time, if I don't go to a meeting, I'm going to drink. Or if I don't go see my therapist, I'm going to do this to myself, whatever. Instead of, when I do these things, I will have a good recovery. When I do these things, I'll live a transformed life. When I do these things, I will change and be a transformed person. That's what I do in my coaching and interventions. Is I'm looking at, when we do the right things, our life will change. Right? So think about it this way. If you have credit card debt and all you focus on is getting out of credit card debt, what's your focus? Debt. If you focus on building wealth, what's naturally going to happen to the debt? It's going to go away. So if we focus on recovery and living a transformed life and figuring out who we are, we don't have to worry about addiction. I'd never refer to myself as an addict anymore. It's my choice. I don't, because I'm a transformed man. Right? So I feel like what's missing in people's lives is figuring out what grounds you and what identifies you. Because if we don't figure out what identifies us, something else will identify us. And you look around the world today, I mean, holy cow. I don't want the world defining who I am. I don't want the public school system defining who my kid is, right? I don't want, a treatment program defining who I am. I want to go back to the source and the truth. And so for me, in a lot of what I do with my coaching, and it's funny when I say it sometimes, because people either tune out or they tune in, right? The coaching I do with people is really focused on who we are in Christ. For me personally, and when I work with people, when they can ground themselves in something that is truth. Now, it takes a while to get there if you don't believe that stuff, right?
Right.
But if that door is opened and people want to explore that, there is truth there, because, see, God says that I'm his workmanship. God says I'm his child. God says I'm a saint. I'm an heir to the throne. God says all these great things about who I am. I haven't had to do one thing to earn that. It just is truth. And that's for me. And that's in my faith in what I do. And about probably 55% of people that I work with could care less about that. They just want my help, right? Even with interventions, like, hey, we know you're a Christian, but we don't care about that. I was like, cool, don't worry about it. We're just going to get done what needs to get done. But I let people know that's from where I come now, because that is what has given me the stability in my life. And again, I fall short every day with the way I want to behave and want to act and things I want to do, right? It's just because I'm human. But I feel like we're just looking for stuff in the wrong places. And obviously that conversation can go a lot of different directions. But from a simplistic purpose, we're looking at things that are a moving target. Like if I want to find my identity and value in what my wife thinks about me, then I'm going to be up and down every other day. Hey, my wife thinks I'm doing great today. Hey, my wife got mad at me today. Hey, or my boss thinks I'm doing great today. He gave me kudos. Or why isn't my boss congratulating me today? Well, I must not be doing a good job. Or hey, you scored 3 goals in the game. You're doing great, son. Or why didn't you score a goal yesterday? I mean, talk about a yo-yo of identity.
Yeah.
Right. But if all of us can figure out the core thing of what defines who we are, then anything that comes against that is false. Right? If someone says, hey, Ron, you're an idiot. And if you believe you're an idiot, guess what? You're an idiot.
Right.
But you're not. Right. And people say, Rob, you're acting like an idiot. Okay, I can identify with that.
Yeah.
Because that's my behavior. But I am not an idiot if someone calls me one unless I believe it. Right. So that's the thing, like to really truly figure out who you are. And again, anything else that comes against that is completely false. And why even entertain the thought? There's a lot of power in that.
Yes, that makes a whole lot of sense. What motivated you to write the book, the Addiction Intervention book? Can you tell our audience a little bit about what they can expect to get out of that book?
Yeah, sure. So it's a tool. I mean, it says on the front, 11 breakthrough strategies, right, for professionals and families to help people find loved one, find freedom from addiction. And that's why. Because I don't think people understand the power of an intervention and what it really does. The TV show is out there, kind of screwed up the whole idea of an intervention in a sense, but the general idea is there. That they're on TV, right? They're on camera. They're not shocked that there's an intervention happening. But there's a lot of different ways to help people, which is why I wrote the book. It's why I interviewed over 20 people and just selected the 10 that are in the book, because they're different parts of the country. They have different processes that they do to help a family understand there is more than one way to help your loved one break the cycle of addiction. But again, if they don't choose to get healthy, you can still get healthy as the family member. And loved one, if you decide to get healthy and your family doesn't, then you can learn how to live life with an unhealthy family that doesn't have to mess with your recovery. Right. So that's why I wrote the book, was one, to share my story, two, to share my process as I do it, Lifted from the Rut, and which is the name of my business. I call my business a business ministry, a business tree. Is, liftedfromtherut.com is where people can go to get all my information. But also sharing these stories about amazing people around the country that help people. And I just want to honor my friend David Marion. He's in the book. He was a good friend of mine in the recovery field and just a solid interventionist and coach. And he died about a month or two, I think it was a month ago, just suddenly with a heart attack. And I was glad to capture his story in the book because he's a great guy. And the cool thing is that in the book and on the front cover, there's a website that people can go to and actually watch all the actual interviews I did with them, like you and I are doing now.
Oh, great.
They can actually see, it brings the book to life.
Yeah.
And I wish every treatment center would buy 10 copies and give it to their staff, or, families would just buy them and hand them out at Christmas to people and say, hey, I know you got addiction in your family, read this thing. And several families have found the book on Amazon, reached out to me through my free discovery call, and hired me to do an intervention for their family member just from having a book on Amazon. So that's why I wrote that one. And then I wrote the other one, the 101 Reasons to Quit Getting Drunk During the Holidays book, which is really a exploratory journey that each person can do with their relationship to alcohol. But insert shopping, insert pornography, just change alcohol to whatever your addiction is. Read the book. And a lot of the book is blank, which is kind of fun because it gives people the challenging questions to answer about their journey with addiction.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And we're going to showcase those books on our Facebook group and some other places around the internet. So we'll get some exposure for you. Rob, for people out there struggling, what advice can you give them?
Yeah, well, reach out to someone locally to get some help. I mean, just find resources in your local area. I mean, there's free resources between AA, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, NA, OA, all those things. So the excuse is in your head because the resources are there. And then if you need great professional places like treatment centers or programs and things like that, more of a acute need where you may have mental health, mental illness, or just serious substance abuse, reach out for help. And please, if you struggle with whatever the drug it is, don't try to detox at home. People that try to detox and they're dependent on alcohol die in their homes all the time because they're just going to try it at home. Get professional detox, whether you got Medicaid or commercial insurance. I mean, call a local resource. Call me. Go to liftedfromtherut.com on my resource page and try to find something local in your area. But just don't try to do it alone because that's how people die.
How can people contact you?
One, they can just call me, 970-331-4469, and I mean that. Two, just go to liftedfromtherut.com. Everything you need is on there. Podcasts, how to bring me to an event or a moment as a speaker to your event or conference or men's retreat. All the details are all over the website. You just got to scroll around a little bit. Liftedfromtherut.com is all you need. Everything is there. I'm all over Facebook, and find me on LinkedIn or wherever. But
Okay.
phone numbers are really cool, quick, easy way to just call me or text me or whatever, and I'll respond as I can.
Okay, that's liftedfromtherut.com. And for everybody listening out there, all this will be in the podcast notes. I want to thank you so much, Rob, for being on the podcast, sharing your personal story and shining a spotlight on the addiction health crisis we have. I want to wish you good fortune in your work to help people going forward, and best of luck working and finalizing your dream. We didn't get to talk about much of creating the men's transitional home. Comments and suggestions for the podcast, you can email me at itsawrapwithrap@gmail.com. Our Facebook group and page, It's a Rap with Rap. We're on Instagram. It's a Rap with Rap podcast. We have a website. It's a rapwithrap.com. And everything's on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube. It's a Rap with Rap, the podcast uncut. I want to thank everyone for listening. Please stay safe. And for now, it's a wrap.